Part 3, politics. A quote from the British philosopher and poet John Lennon. The thing the 60s did was to show us the possibilities and the responsibility that we all had. It wasn't the answer. It just gave us a glimpse of the possibility. For me, this section is the most personal. As a person coming out of high school and into college and getting interested in history, these were some of my early heroes, the people you're going to hear from this evening. The first people that I read independently that I wanted to find out stuff. Before the internet, of course. And their words have always been with me and have sustained me. And there's a reason that they're timeless. The causes that they fought for, the hope and belief they had in the future and in each other. And what Lennon said, I think, is important. It's not just a matter of, it's a matter of challenge. You have the responsibility to move the world. So without further ado, we'll move on to politics.
Love is not an easy feeling to put into words, nor is loyalty, or trust, or joy. But he was all of these. He loved life completely, and he lived it intensely. What he leaves to us is what he said, what he did, and what he stood for. A speech he made to the young people of South Africa on their Day of Affirmation in 1966 sums it up best. Few will have the greatness to bend history itself, but each of us can work to change a small portion of events. And in the total of all these acts will be written the history of this generation. It is from numberless diverse acts of courage and belief that human history is shaped. Each time a man stands up for an ideal, or acts to improve the lot of others, or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build a current that can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. For the fortunate among us, there is the temptation to follow the easy and familiar paths of personal ambition, financial success, so grandly spread before those who enjoy the privilege of education. But that is not the road that history has marked for us. Like it or not, we live in times of danger and uncertainty. But they are also more open to the creative energy of men than any other time in history. All of us will ultimately be judged, and as the years pass, we will surely judge ourselves on the effort we've contributed to building a new world society and the extent to which our ideals and our goals have shaped that event. That is the way he lived. That is what he leaves us. My brother be not idealized or enlarged in death beyond what he was in life, to be remembered simply as a good and decent man who saw wrong and tried to right it, saw suffering and tried to heal it, saw war and tried to stop it. As he said many times, in many parts of this nation, to those he touched and sought to touch him, some men see things as they are and say, why? I dream things that never were and say, why not?
Men have landed and walked on the moon. 2 Americans, astronauts of Apollo 11, steered their fragile, 4-legged lunar module safely and smoothly to the historic landing yesterday at 4:17:40 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Neil A. Armstrong, the 38-year-old commander, radioed to Earth and the mission control room here. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. The first men to reach the moon. Armstrong and his co-pilot, Colonel Edwin E. Aldrin Jr. of the Air Force brought their ship to rest on the level rock-strewn plain near the southwestern shore of the arid Sea of Tranquility. About 6.5 hours later, Armstrong opened the landing craft's hatch, stepped slowly down the ladder, and declared as he planted the first human footprint on the lunar crust, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." His first step on the moon came at 10:56:20 p.m. as a television camera outside the craft transmitted his every move to an awed and excited audience of 100 millions of people on Earth. "The surface is fine and powdery," the astronaut reported. "I can pick it up loosely with my toe. It does adhere in fine layers like powdered charcoal to the sole and sides of my boots. I only go in a small fraction of an inch, maybe an eighth of an inch, but I can see the footprints of my boots and the treads in the fine sandy particles." After 19 minutes of Armstrong's testing, Colonel Aldrin joined him outside the craft.
We are gathered here today, not so much to observe the end of the fast, but because we are a family, bound together in a common struggle for justice. We are a union family, celebrating our unity and the nonviolent nature of our movement. Perhaps in the future, we will come together at other times and places to break bread and to renew our courage and to celebrate important victories. The fast has had different meanings for different people. Some of you may still wonder about its meaning and importance. It was not intended as a pressure against any growers. For that reason, we have suspended negotiations and arbitration proceedings and relaxed the militant picketing of boycotting of the strike during this period. I undertook the fast because my heart was filled with the grief and pain for the sufferings of farm workers. The fast was first for me, and then for all of us in this union. It was a fast for nonviolence and a call to sacrifice. When we are really honest with ourselves, we must admit that our lives are all that really belong to us. So it is how we use our lives that determines what kind of men we are. It is my deepest belief that by only giving our lives do we find life. I am convinced that the truest act of courage, the strongest act of manliness, is to sacrifice ourselves for others in a totally nonviolent struggle for justice. To be a man is to suffer for others. God help us to be men.
It's 50 years since the Stonewall riots, where a lesbian threw the first punch, and her queer family rose up and refused to be beaten, ostracized, or abused. The nurses, the teachers, artists, artistes, sex workers, designers, conductors of a bus, the mothers, the fathers, the famous and infamous, the typical and untypical, people like us. Those brave, big-hearted people sparked a global gay awareness. Magazines, clubs, and networks flourished, demanding justice, equality, and fairness. Let's remember and celebrate our history, but not falter in the ongoing fight. To eradicate prejudice through education, teach that love is a human right.
So we've got one more thing, an awesome finale. A quick hand again for the presenters, please. I want to say thanks again to everybody for coming out. It's such a personal event for me and Christina, and it's the support we've gotten, the encouragement in the hallways, emails from people are just wonderful. So I'm thinking we'll do it again next year if you guys are interested. All right, so let's finish up with some great music. Thanks again for coming.